Today's guest is Dr. Woody Lane from Oregon in the United States. Woody is a livestock nutritionist and forage specialist living in Rosenberg, Oregon, and he's written a couple of books and done a lot of extension in America and in some other places around the world. Do you want to give us a bit of a background on how you've got to where you are and I guess how you got into agriculture as well?
Well, I can blame you for blame New Zealand for getting me into agriculture. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I grew up in a city on the East Coast. I grew up in New York City, just a couple of miles from a well-known politician. I went to school there and whatever in downtown, and I had skills in things like riding subways and jaywalking and things of that nature, which you do in big cities, right? Yeah. But I went to college and got a bachelor's degree in biological science, but then I joined something called the American Peace Corps. And I was in Malaysia, which is a volunteer organization, especially for people just coming out of college or whatever. And I joined that and was there for 2.5 years. And at the end of that, I was supposed to go back to the United States, but I was dealing with a lot of farmers. I was on the island of Borneo, and there were farmers there, rice farmers, and so I had some animals. But I kind of really that seemed to be a very valuable thing to do. To go into that, to do that as a profession, but I had no idea how. You grew up in a city, what do you know? And I, when I left there, which of course is near Singapore for those who are not familiar with the geography, it's there. I routed myself down to Auckland because I knew somebody who was living in Auckland and then Rotorua, and for the next 6 months, spent time in New Zealand. Hitchhike. This is back then. It wasn't fancy. It was a backpack and hitchhiking, and staying in youth hostels and wherever I could. And I got onto some farms and talked my way on and say, I just want to learn and could I be here? My first time I was actually on a regular farm. I was mowing. I was hoeing tomatoes on a farm, on a dairy farm. It was a 10-acre field. Do you know how big 10 acres is? It's about the size of Russia.
Yeah.
When you're doing it like that. Yeah, it was midsummer, and I worked on farms, and then they were dairy. It was a dairy, and I truly loved being near animals and working things. And I worked on a farm down near Invercargill, and another one up in King Country in Otahanga. And when I was there, it was the week of shearing, so I was rouseabout for a week, and it's a good thing because I didn't know much else what to do, and I learned a lot about just being around. And when I got back to the United States, I did some other stuff for 2 years, but then enrolled at the university to learn. Actually, I wanted to learn how to drive a tractor, but the university was Cornell, and Cornell University, they don't teach you how to drive a tractor. You become a scientist, which is what I did. I earned a master's degree there, and then worked in livestock nutrition, and then worked in West Virginia with beef, cattle, and sheep farmers on a project there under West Virginia University for a couple of years, and then went back to Cornell and got my doctorate, and did my research for a doctorate for weaning orphan lambs, young lambs, early weaning and looking at the physiology and biochemistry of it. And from there, after that, I got a job in our upper Midwest in Wisconsin as the state extension beef, cattle, and sheep nutrition position. So I was providing information to the different what we call counties, areas, the extension people there, and giving hundreds of talks and making. I even made videos back then. They were very simple compared to the technology today. It was long before cell phones, and in fact, desktop computers were a new idea back. Our one of the most highest technology was a fax machine. So it was different. But in 1990, my wife and I moved from Wisconsin to Oregon, and I've been there ever since. And I've been developing my own, working for myself and as a consultant, working with some national organizations, doing direct consulting, meaning going to farms and stuff, and then developed my own courses to teach forage and nutrition and beef cattle production and sheep production. And the ones that really took off the most were the forages, grazing courses. And I've done many of those. Those are like 10 weeks long, once a week for 3 hours. And we set up, it wasn't on the university, it was self-made. So people would pay me and I do the advertising and whatever. And there'd be 30 to 40 farmers that come to that, and we would be going through the principles and then pasture walks or whatever at the same time. And I did that for, till before COVID. That's when I stopped.
Yeah.
And other workshops. Of course, I've been doing workshops around our country, and in fact, came to New Zealand a couple of times as well. On our honeymoon, we back in late 1980s, I knew some friends there, and gave a seminar at Massey. On our honeymoon, and while I was also in the States, what we developed was what you would call discussion group, which became a very big part of what I do. Is that I developed 3 of them. In Oregon, if we said, they do this in New Zealand, and this is a very good thing, there'll be a kiss of death here. Farmers and ranchers are very proud. They don't want to copy somebody else. Yeah. What happened, though, was that the system that developed was parallel. It was exactly the same because the system works. And we developed it. And in 2001, right after 9/11, I came to Christchurch for the World Sheep and Wool Congress. And I was there and gave talks there, and then spent another 3 weeks driving around South Island, through the Catlins and over into Cargill and all places, and went with a couple of facilitators to their groups. Yeah. And I was so impressed in a way because it was exactly the same as ours. It was run for about the same length of time, and then afterwards you go inside, and then you have a discussion, or go inside or you get together and you have a discussion. And then you end. Except the difference is that when the groups ended there in South Island, they'd break out the beer, and in our case, we didn't do that. But the parallel was phenomenal, and I think it's not an accident because that system works very, very well. And so, how you all developed it long before us, good 10 years before us, and was very successful. Has been very successful. We started to develop it here. And it was very successful for the members. I mean, you could tell the difference when you go by a person's farm if they're in these discussion groups or not, just by looking at the pastures. So that's I've been able to cobble together a way of doing things, and without the trying to deal with an overhead of administrative, all that type of stuff that deans and board of directors and all that tells you what you can or can't do. I did it myself. And I've been doing that ever since. And in the process was also writing magazine articles. And I have been a columnist for an American magazine called The Shepherd, which is a national magazine. And I've been writing a column there called From the Feed Trough since the early 90s. And in the last few years, I have collected those and rewritten those articles. They're about 1,000 words, 1,500 words, and compiled 3 books, 1 on nutrition and 2 on forages and pastures, and grazing, and they're now available, and they're selling in Australia and New Zealand. I know that because I get royalties. I mean, not enough to retire on. Don't get me wrong. But a little bit.
I've got your second one now.
You got the second one. Okay.
Yep. And last week.
That's it.
Very quickly. So, rest of the week.
It's going to be hard to sign that. I could write it from here, but I don't think that work. That has been a real joy, because way back when I was in college, before I ever got into agriculture, I had these dreams of being perhaps a writer. Yeah. Of course, one thing leads to another in life, and you never get there. Now I've been doing it, so it's been a real. I thought I was writing the great novel. That never happened ever, but I had been able to produce 3 books of what I think is good information, written so that people can read it and enjoy it. The second book has a chapter on dinosaur nutrition, which is but if you think about it, dinosaurs grazed. The big ones, we're talking, the huge ones with the long necks, right? They grazed. And if they grazed, I mean, they might have been leaves up high, whatever, but they grazed. Those are leaves in plants. They have fiber. And how do you get nutrients out of fiber? Well, you need to have some fermentation sac somewhere, because they don't have enzymes to do. We don't have enzymes to digest cellulose, but bacteria and protozoa in the rumen do. And in our tract, or lower tract, they call the microbiome. That's the common term now, but it's the same thing that goes on inside the rumen. And sheep and cattle, and deer and goats are all ruminants. And what they do is they derive nutrition from parts of plants that we can't. I mean, we cannot live on lucerne hay. It won't work. We eat a little bit, and there's a little bit of digestion of fiber in our lower tract, but not much, and you couldn't live on enough of it. But and horses, which are not ruminants, but they have a large place in the large intestine where there's all that fermentation goes on, they have evolved to do that, and ruminants, sheep and cattle particularly, are exquisitely designed to extract the most amount of nutrients from fibrous plants. And if you take that and go, well, wait a moment, these dinosaurs ate it. How do they do that? Well, it kind of allows you to theorize in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that good fermentation has to exist in at least, I don't know, I can't translate it fast enough, it needs to be about 50 or 55 degrees Fahrenheit. All right? That's good. Dinosaurs are reptiles, or reptile-like animals, and they're cold-blooded.
Yeah.
How they get that warmth makes you kind of think a little bit. So that was one of my chapters. It's kind of a thinking chapter. What if?